your seats. And let me ask the media or the television station representatives if they'd approach just for a moment. Mr. Brindle, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ready to do. Thank you. Take your seats. Mr. Brindle, you can continue with your direction.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? May I approach the witness? I do have exhibits.
Well, have they been admitted into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor, they have.
Yeah, then just show it to her over the that way you don't have to go back and forth.
Hey, Ms. John DeKermer, you testified before the break that you did a DNA analysis on a pair of jeans.
Yes, sir. Item 32.
Item 32, A and B, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to place a photograph of the jeans on the projector here so the jury can see. And could you please take your time and explain to the jury what part of the jean you tested?
If that is the jeans, the pair of jeans that I tested, then
Yes.
I tested the stain on the lower near the seam of the lower left leg. That's it.
Would that be it right there?
Yes, sir.
And how did you conduct that test?
Since it's got that red-brown staining, I did serology testing for the presence of blood, and it indicated the presence of blood. So I took a cutting from that stain, which was representative of that stain, and went ahead, extracted the DNA, and conducted my DNA analysis on it.
And what was the result of your analysis?
So that is 32B, the stain on bottom seam of leg. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin is the source of the DNA profile identified on item 32B.
Once again, I'm going to put another photograph of the jeans for the jury to view. Did you get a sample from different parts of the gene, different locations?
Yes, I did.
And is this another location that you...
It's hard for me to see exactly where this is, so I can't tell you.
Okay. Is this, if you saw something that appeared to be red found color, it might be blood, would you have tested it?
The other one that I tested was RBS down the front left leg. Yes, sir.
And what was the result of your analysis on that?
This was item 32A. That was the stain on the leg of the jeans.
Excuse me.
Pardon?
Mr. Prindle, can I, just so I understand, these items or what is being identified, there's a marker to the left that says
Left knee.
It says left and it has KNER. Is that placed on by the state now to help with the identification?
Yes, it
or
is.
was it placed there by the
And did you put that mark on there?
No, I didn't.
No, it's done by the state.
I'm sorry.
It's done by the state.
All right. Go ahead. So go back to your last question.
And I'm sorry, but once again, what was the result of your analysis regarding the stain on the leg?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan is the source of the DNA profile identified on item 32A.
All right. So, Mr. Prindle, what you aren't doing, or I believe have not done, is that you're showing this one was State's Exhibit 279 that hasn't been admitted into evidence.
And we have a stipulation.
Nor do I believe that the prior photograph, I don't remember the number, I thought it was 277.
277 is correct, and we do have a stipulation regarding those two exhibits.
Okay, but remember that as you're asking the question, you have to also be referring to this as the exhibit, although it doesn't correspond with the witness's system of numbering what the items that she tested. But Mr. Clark, I believe that there is no objection to State's exhibits. Was it 277?
277, yes, and 279.
And 279?
That's correct, and if there are some other photographs, there's no objection as well.
All right, so why don't we take care of the others as well, since we're addressing them at this time? And since if you anticipate using them with this witness. So 277 was a photograph of the jeans with a marking.
277, the photograph of the jeans with the, on the bottom seam.
And then there was 279. 279. And there was a second shot photo of jeans with the markings as well.
That's correct.
What's 278?
278 is another photograph of the jeans with several markings indicated on them.
And you're going to be using that with this witness?
Yes.
Okay, and what else do you have?
And also I have, Your Honor, I have a photograph of a watch, which is 280.
A watch?
Yes.
Okay. And again, Mr. Clark, can I confirm for you, since there's two others that I was unaware of, 277, 278, 279, and 280. Does the state have any objection to these proposed exhibits?
Those are the defense's.
All right, excuse me, it's the defense. Mr. Prindle, the court is going to admit these as state's exhibits 277 and 280. Go ahead and proceed with your direct examination on these items.
Thank you. And Ms. Underkerm, I'm going to place what's been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 278 for the jury and for yourself to view. And those jeans, do you recognize those jeans?
Yes, sir.
And were those another pair of jeans where you took samples from and did DNA analysis?
I believe so.
Those
If they
are the
have
same
my
set of-
markings, yes.
Let me back up. It's just one set of jeans, one pair of jeans you did analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And these are the same jeans?
Yes.
And is it true that upon completion of your analysis that you found a DNA profile that fit the profile of both Mr. Chan and Mr. Martin on those jeans?
Yes, I did.
Now, in your report, you indicate that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that Jeremy Martin was the source of DNA profile identified in several of the items. We already talked about 32B. That was the genes, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then we move on to item number 78 on your list, which refers to a projectile. Now, the projectile, did you know where that projectile came from?
I think as per the evidence receipt, it came from marker, number 78 was projectile from marker 6.
Okay. Now, earlier this morning, there was testimony by Las Cruces Police Department evidence technician, Ms. Hill, and she testified that the projectile indicated in marker 6 was found in the hallway on the 7th floor of the hotel in Conto. Did you do an analysis on the projectile?
On item 78, yes, I did.
Yes, and can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what your findings were with regard to that projectile?
So I took a swab of the projectile, and by swab I mean it basically looks like just like a cotton tip Q-tip, and I moisten it with sterilized deionized water or acetone, and just swab the surface of the item that I'm testing. What it does is it picks up the DNA that's on that item onto that swab. So now I have DNA from a large surface, if that's the case, or the entire surface in case of this bullet, and it's on one swab now. So I took a wet swab of the projectile and extracted the DNA that I got on it, and proceeded with DNA analysis. I did test it for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 78. I then went ahead and performed my DNA analysis on this evidence, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin is the source of the DNA profile that was identified on item 78.
Which was the projectile?
Yes, sir.
Moving on to item number 81. Your report indicates a swab of marker 10. As I stated earlier, this morning there was testimony from Las Cruces Police Department evidence technician Ms. Hill, who testified that
to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin is the source of the DNA profile identified on item 81.
And you said that was blood?
Yes, sir. No, sorry, pardon me. It was a swab.
A swab.
So they had already given me the cotton tip swab.
But did you make a determination at some point in time whether that swab contained blood?
Yes, I did.
And?
I tested it for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 81.
Thank you. And there's two other swabs that are indicated in your report. The first one is item 84, a swab from letter C. And once again, there was testimony this morning from Las Cruces Police Department evidence technician Ms. Hill, who testified that the swab that she took, the swab referred to as item C, and she took that swab from a red substance on the wall in the hallway of the 7th floor of the hotel. Did you perform a test on that swab?
Yes, that was item 84, the swab from letter C.
And did you do a test, a serology test to see whether there was blood on in that swab?
Yes, I did.
And what was your result, please?
Blood was indicated on item 84.
And did you also do a DNA analysis?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of your analysis?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile identified on item 84.
And there's one other item from a swab. It's item number 87, swab from letter F in your report. Once again, there was testimony this morning from Las Cruces Ms. Hill, who testified that the swab in letter F was one that she took, and it was from a red substance on the wall, once again on the wall in the hallway of the 7th floor of the hotel in Canton. Did you determine whether or not that swab contained any blood?
I did test it for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 87.
And also, did you do a DNA analysis on that swab?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the result?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile that was identified on item 87.
Now, did you do an analysis on a watch?
Yes, I did.
And is that identified as item number 46 in your report?
Yes, sir.
And once again, I have State's Exhibit 280 has been entered into evidence. I'm going to publish that to the jury. And do you recognize that watch?
Yes, sir.
And could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what type of analysis you did on that watch?
So upon visual screening of the watch, there wasn't any apparent staining observed. So I took a swab of the watch, of the entire watch, and I extracted the DNA from that to determine the user and if there was touch DNA from anybody else.
And what was the result of your analysis?
A DNA mixture of 3 or more individuals was obtained from item 46, the watch. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan is the source of the major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture. Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA mixture.
And you said 3 or more, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In a mixture?
Yes.
And
To me, and again touches this mic, their DNA will be on it too. So if I was to swab this and do a DNA analysis of it, I would probably find a mixture from all the individuals, or maybe quite a few of the individuals who touched this. And that's what I mean by when I get a DNA mixture. And I'm sorry, what was the other question?
no, I just wanted to ask you how many different ways, or several different ways that DNA could be transferred from.
Stay by the microphone when you walk in the other direction, it becomes harder to hear.
So I was having to explain to the jury how many different ways DNA can be transferred from one source to another.
Sorry. So one of the things is, of course, touch, but there's something called a secondary transfer too. So if I shook hands for 2 minutes with somebody and then came and picked up this glass of water, then their DNA could end up on this. They could have directly touched it, or like I said, there are various ways.
Okay. And if 2 individuals were to get in a scuffle, would it be possible for it to be a DNA transfer?
Sure.
Okay, Ms. Sandro-Kermer, the following item we're going to talk about is item number 16 on your report, and that is the handgun. And Your Honor, I'm going to ask that the witness be allowed to demonstrate with the handgun that's already been admitted into evidence how she processed that and did that analysis on that gun.
Let me hear her description of it. Do we have the weapon?
Yes, Your Honor. Sir.
All right. Let me ask Mr. Narciso if he'll provide it to the witness. And let me ask the witness if she's comfortable in determining that the weapon remains secure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So will you please make sure that the handgun's been cleared?
Yes, that's what I meant by being secure.
Yes, it is.
Okay, but you've checked it to make sure that it's not loaded. It
Yes.
doesn't contain bullets.
Well, as far as I can tell, I'm not a firearms expert, so it looks safe.
Do you recognize that item?
Yes, sir.
And are there any markings on that evidence or on that box that you put onto that piece of evidence?
Yes, I did. The case number, the item number, and the day I tested it, as well as my initials are on the packaging itself. And the evidence tape with which I secured it after my testing also has my initials and the date it was tested.
Okay. And do you recall what caliber that handgun was? The caliber of the gun?
From what I've written in my notes, it was a Glock 31 Z-Force NTX Night Ops handgun, and the serial number matches.
Okay. And what type of analysis, what type of testing or examination did you do with regards to that handgun?
I tested it for the presence of blood, and no blood was detected on item 16.
And what testing did you do beyond that?
So once I tested it for the presence of blood and it came negative, the next step was to test for the user or anybody who would have come in contact with the gun itself. So, may I?
Did you swab the gun?
So I took one cotton swab and I wet it with acetone, which helps take more of the DNA off of the surface. And I swabbed the grip, the handle, the grip, the trigger guard, and the slide.
So you swabbed more than one area, is that accurate? You swabbed more than one area on the gun.
Yes, sir.
And is that something you would normally do?
Yes.
And did you do then a DNA analysis?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of that analysis?
A DNA mixture of 2 or more individuals was obtained from item 16. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan is the source of the major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture. Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this mixture.
When you say 2 or more, is there any way you can determine how many more?
No, sir.
But it's possible that it could have been more than 2.
I know for sure it was more than 1 and at least 2.
Okay. And is there any way of telling where exactly on that firearm the DNA came from?
It was one of the areas I swabbed, but it could have been any of those.
So if I was to say that the DNA from John Doe came from the trigger, would that be an accurate statement?
No, it wouldn't.
Why not?
Because I swabbed all of those indicated areas. I swabbed the trigger guard, the grip, the slide with the same swab.
And once again, you testified a few minutes ago that DNA could be transferred many different ways.
Yes.
And even on this particular item that you tested, this handgun, if 2 persons were to get in a struggle, would it be possible for DNA to be transferred?
Sure.
And if 2 people got in a struggle and DNA could be transferred by just touch
Yes.
without the person actually holding that gun?
Sure.
Got a second? You mentioned a user test that resulted in a result of a mixture of two or more. How do you conduct that test, and what's the basis for that analysis?
I'm sorry.
The user test to determine that we get a mixture, a major user, you called it a user test. What's the basis for that analysis? How do you make that determination?
User is basically who would have had their DNA on the gun, either by direct contact or indirect contact. Because I did test it negative for blood, so at that point I'd want to see whose DNA may or may not be present on the gun.
Okay. And then you mentioned that Mr. Chan was the major source of that DNA. How do you make that determination?
So when I get the DNA information for any evidence item, like I said at the beginning, you get half of your DNA from your mother and half from your father. So that means at any given location, you can only have two forms of the DNA on that location. If I see more than two, I know that there's more than one person. There's at least two, there could be more. Once that determination is made, I try to see if a major can be resolved. What I mean by that is, if one of the individuals in that mixture contributed most of the DNA, then his or her DNA information will stand out. And I can resolve a major DNA profile from that mixture.
Okay. And in this case, it was Mr. Chan's that stood out
Yes, sir.
as the major source.
Pardon me?
As the major source.
Yes.
And you mentioned that Jeremy Martin cannot be excluded. Could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how you arrive at that conclusion?
So at all the locations on the DNA that could be analyzed and there wasn't any information missing, when I looked at those specific areas of the DNA, Mr. Jeremy Martin's DNA information was all present on those locations.
But that is not a definitive conclusion, is it? In other words, if someone to say that without a doubt his DNA was on that gun.
Again, this is an expert witness. He can be a witness.
So in your opinion, if someone were to make a statement that Mr. Martin's DNA was on that gun, period, definitely, would that be accurate?
Jeremy Martin cannot be eliminated as a possible contributor, and that's the reason I follow this phrase with the statistical analysis that was for this mixture, just to show how rare or common this mixture is and how many people could be included in this mixture.
And how many?
So if you look at the bottom, the DNA mixture identified on item 16 occurs with the following probabilities. It ranges from 1 in 6,900 individuals for Caucasians to 100,000 individuals in the Apache.
So your analysis, your conclusion was that Jeremy Martin's DNA, he could have been a contributor. It's possible.
Yes.
One final question. You said regarding the handgun, item 16 on your list, you said you did test for blood.
Yes, sir.
And is that standard, something that you would always do? And why did you do it?
I believe in the DNA code that was submitted, they indicated to see if there was any blood present, and if so, whose.
And your result was?
No blood was detected on item 16.
And when you tested for blood, what parts of the handgun do you test?
I tested the inside of the barrel and just the barrel itself.
Is there any particular reason why you were testing inside of the barrel?
That's usually where we test for any blowback.
What is blowback?
I'm sorry, sir. It's just a term I use. I'm not a firearms expert, but I believe it's the blood that's patted back. I don't know if that's the truth. But because of that, I know that when I'm testing it for blood, that's the area that I swab.
Okay. And there was no blood found inside the barrel?
No. And also on visual inspection of the gun, like I said before, I did not see any red-brown staining that would indicate the presence of blood so that I could swab it from that particular area and test it for the presence of blood.
Thank you. Your Honor, pass the witness.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Cross-examination of Ms. Sandu.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi.
All right, so let's just start off and go through some of these items, because I have some further questioning, but I'd like to start where the state left off, all right, on the handgun.
Yes, sir.
All right. You were specifically asked about blowback, and that's a term you use, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're not being, whether DNA was associated with the slide or the trigger guard, you can't say that, right?
No, I cannot.
Only that your single swab of the grip, trigger guard, and slide yielded this DNA sample that we've talked about, right?
That's true.
Okay. Now, have you ever learned, or did you know that this handgun belonged to Tai Chan?
I believe the DNA code had, pardon me.
Sure.
Yes, the DNA code did specify that it was Mr. Tai Chan's gun.
Okay. And so you weren't surprised to find that the major donor of the DNA sample on the gun belonged to the owner of that gun, correct?
That's right.
Certainly that wasn't an out-of-the-ordinary finding, right?
That's right.
Okay. And then on the handgun specifically, the DNA sample that you achieved from the places associated with handling that weapon yielded one or more donors, correct?
Two or more.
I'm sorry, two or more donors, right?
Yes, sir.
And what you were able to find to a degree of scientific certainty was that Mr. Chan was the primary donor, right?
That's true.
And that Jeremy Martin couldn't be eliminated as a possible second donor on that gun, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, counsel asked you a series of questions about how DNA ends up in a certain location, right?
Yes,
Correct?
it did.
All right. And I think we've had this conversation before, but that there's three major types of there's three, semen is a rich source of DNA, right?
That's true.
Saliva is a rich source of DNA, correct?
Yes,
And blood is a rich source of DNA.
that's right.
But we transfer our DNA in other ways, right?
Yes.
Either through touch, like our hands have there's grease on our skin that can transfer DNA, right?
Absolutely.
And we slough off skin cells at a shockingly remarkable rate, right? It's kind of we slough off a lot of skin cells, right?
Some shed more than others, yes.
And it's called shedding, not sloughing off.
I got the meaning.
I'm going to rely on your language, not mine. So shedding, right?
Yes, sir.
And so when you talk about this idea, this concept of transfer DNA, when it's not semen and saliva and blood, DNA from the human body is DNA from the human body. If you're able to find it, it doesn't matter what the source is, right? Like the DNA is no different in blood or semen or saliva than it is on skin or grease from your hands, right?
Right, your DNA profile stays the same in every cell of your body.
So just because you don't find a semen sample or a blood sample doesn't denigrate or change the donor or possible donors, right? It's still DNA from that same person, whether it's from skin or grease or blood or semen or saliva, right?
That's right.
All right. And so when counsel asked you if DNA can be transferred during a struggle, right? Most certainly it can.
Absolutely.
And we could speculate all day long about how DNA gets on a surface from a touching or spittle or whatever, right?
That's true.
But all you're testifying to is the presence of donors in these DNA samples, right?
Yes.
With the knowledge that DNA transfers by touching something or by spitting on it or by depositing semen or blood, all the ways we've talked about, right?
Yes.
And conclusively what you know is that Tai Chan is the primary donor on the pistol and Jeremy Martin can't be excluded as a second donor, right? A second source.
Not source. He cannot be eliminated as a contributor to the mixture. I can't say source till it meets...
I'm sorry, I didn't use the right word, source. A contributor.
Contributor.
Okay, all right. Now, the numbers that we talked about, those aren't guesses, right? I mean, you're a scientist first, right?
Yes, sir.
And
however, those are statistical estimates.
Okay, and the threshold for the statistical estimate for the primary contributor, right, is 1 in 300 billion?
Yes,
okay.
That's true.
Now, how many people are there in the world?
Just over 7 billion.
Okay, so that's a really high number. It's very precise, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I think you talked about our DNA profile being kind of like our Social Security number. It's specific to each one of us, right?
That's true, other than identical twins.
Okay, and assuming that I don't have an identical twin, that Social Security number or that degree of specificity for me, you're able to say to a degree of scientific certainty that Tai Chan's DNA was on that pistol, right?
That he was the source of the major DNA profile that was resolved.
Okay, now for Mr. Martin, as you talked about a number, a statistical number for Mr. Martin as well, correct?
Not him specifically, just the mixture and all the analyzable locations on the DNA that I could analyze, the mixture as a whole.
Okay. Let's talk for a moment about how you analyze the data. There's something called alleles in DNA testing, right?
Pardon me?
There's something called alleles in DNA testing?
That's right.
Okay. And could you explain to the jury how you are able, when you analyze a DNA sample, what alleles mean and what they have to do with the location on tell the jury what alleles mean.
Alleles are just the alternate forms of DNA. Like I said, you get half of the DNA from your mother and half of it from your father. So every location on a single source DNA profile should only have one peak or DNA form, and it's called an allele, and a maximum of 2 alleles at that location on the DNA.
Okay. And in this case, did you tell the jury, if you will, about the testing that was done and how many alleles of Jeremy Martin were discovered on item 16?
I will have to look through my EPGs and then compare them, because what I do when I get the DNA information and it's a mixture, I have to determine at what locations all of the information is complete, because a lot of stuff can happen during testing, and if the contributor did not contribute enough DNA, it will not be detected. So at those locations, I cannot take those locations into the statistical calculations. So I have to determine which ones have complete DNA information, and then I use those to do the statistical estimates.
Okay, and I think in this case, without you looking at your notes, you were able to to identify 12 of 15 on item 16, right? Loci?
Yes, at 12 of the 15 loci.
Loci, okay. And so you were able to analyze 12 of the 15 loci on, for the DNA sample on item 16. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And certainly when we talk about the ability to analyze a sample, you were able to analyze the sample. There was sufficient DNA on item 16 to analyze the sample, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, explain for the jury, if you will, the analysis for the secondary profile on item 16, and it's on page 2 of your report at the bottom where we're talking about the Caucasian, African American, Apache, Navajo, Southwest Hispanic. Okay, explain that for the jury, if you will.
So you mean the statistical analysis
Yeah,
is what you want me to explain?
Sure, beginning with the DNA mixture identified on item 16 occurs, and then you start talking about the following probability.
So at the locations where the DNA information was complete, there were, we look at 15 locations, and out of those, 12 had fully analyzable mixture. And when I did my statistical calculations of all the possibilities with those alleles, I got this estimate in the 5 main populations in the state of New Mexico. And as per the statistics, the DNA mixture or somebody, random, unrelated individual who could be included in this mixture ranges from 1 in 6,900 individuals for the Caucasians to 100,000 in the Apache population.
Now, has anybody ever advised you that Mr. Martin was Caucasian?
No.
Okay. And that's, you don't necessarily, you're not making a determination based on knowledge of Mr. Martin's ethnicity, correct?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Now, I'd like to show you some photographs that have already been stipulated to by the state. Your Honor, are we on number 23? Is that correct, Judge?
No, we're on 26.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the defendant would move into evidence defense 27 through 40. These are photographs that have already been stipulated to by the state, and they've been shown to the state.
27 through 40, what do we do with 26?
Oh, I'll reserve on 26, Judge. I just marked. I thought you meant we ended on 26.
We're good. You had previously, the court had admitted defense exhibits 1 through 25.
I apologize, sir. I misunderstood you. So we'll reserve on 26. This is 27 through 40. And they're photographs, and I can tell you what each one of them is.
Mr. Prindle, is there any objection to defense exhibits? I believe that this is...
No, the state does not.
There's no objection? All right. So this court is going to admit defense exhibits 27 through 40, rather than having to go through each one of them. I'm assuming that all of them are photographs.
They are, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead and proceed.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as defendants 27, and you just tell me if this is one of the items that was included in your analysis.
And I believe yes, no, it's on.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked as defendants 27. Did you look at a shirt that was identified by your department as 33?
Yes, sir.
And does this shirt does this photograph accurately depict the shirt that you analyzed?
That's right.
Okay. And you were able to reach a determination about stains on the chest and stains on the neck area?
That's right.
And can you tell the jury what, if any, conclusions you were able to make from your DNA analysis on this T-shirt?
So item 33 was the T-shirt, and I performed DNA testing on two areas, 33A, which was the stain on the chest and abdomen area, and 33B, the stain from the neck area. Blood was indicated on items 33A and 33B. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan is the source of the DNA profile identified on item 33B. A DNA mixture of two or more individuals was obtained from item 33A. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan is the source of the DNA, the major DNA profile resolved from this mixture. No interpretation or comparisons could be made regarding the minor contributors because there wasn't enough DNA in there.
And did you ever learn, ma'am, that this T-shirt was the shirt that Tai Chan was wearing?
I believe it was in the DNA code.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State Defendants 28. Is that the same T-shirt?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And 29 is, what is that? Is that just the back of the T-shirt?
I guess.
Okay. Did you take any samples off the back of the shirt?
No, I did not.
All right. So let's move next then to item number 52, if you will, and that's the bed sheet.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The bed sheet was provided in its entirety to your office for your examination?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Did you ever see any photographs of the bed sheet in its, let's just say, natural state at the hotel on the bed, or did you just receive the bed sheet?
I didn't see any photographs.
Okay. I'm going to. All right. So you didn't get the mattress, and it wasn't tucked in. It was just the sheet. Did it come to you in a bag?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me show you what's been marked as Defendants 34. In Defendants 34, you can see the pillows, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see the sheet turned down.
Yes.
Okay. And then you can see the marker H right there.
Yes, sir.
And you can see the blood droplets, right?
Sure, red-brown staining, yes.
Okay. Does that look like a bed sheet?
That looks like a bed sheet,
Okay.
but it's not the one I got.
Do you have the bed sheet that you received?
Not right now.
Is it still in evidence?
No.
This bed sheet that you received is not the one that the bed sheet that we're depicting in H from the hotel bedroom is not the bed sheet you tested?
Not according to my notes.
Judge, may we approach real quick?
Yes. While the attorney's approach, let me ask you to review all of the items that you did receive and see what you're identifying as a bed sheet. You've indicated that you did receive a bed sheet, you just do not believe that it's this one.
That's
So let me ask you to see where in your notes you are addressing the issue of the bed sheet.
Okay.
Go ahead, Judge.